Welcome to episode 2 of Spotlight with Renée Holder. I am your host, and I am so glad that you are here. My guest today is a dedicated educator. She's a singer and budding musician. She's a director, producer, writer, drama therapist, but most of all, she's a humanitarian. I am so proud and so excited to welcome to the Spotlight, Naima Thompson. All right. Hello.
Well, hello.
Welcome, Naima.
So good.
Welcome. Welcome to Spotlight, man. Okay, so I'm so glad you could join me from the other side of the world. You're in Vietnam, so good morning.
Good morning. Yes.
Oh my gosh. Well, I love the background. Is that Trinity Savannah? I see. Yes.
You have to try your best, because hello. This is Savannah, yes.
Fabulous. All right. So I always like to say before we get started, what are you drinking?
Coffee, Vietnamese coffee in a Vietnamese coffee shop cup, not
Nice.
Starbucks. I'm sorry, but Trung, listen to me. I can't speak the people language very well, but this is the greatest coffee on the planet.
Oh, fabulous. All right.
What are you drinking?
I am having a wonderful and refreshing margarita with a Pisco Porton from Peru as my mixer. So yeah, it's this wonderful brand here. Hopefully you can see this pretty well. It's delicious. It's so smooth. I love it a lot. So let's do a little toast.
Is it sundown?
Great conversation with kindred spirits. Cheers, my friend.
Cheers, my friend.
All right.
There's nothing in my coffee, by the way. I just want to say.
You're too funny. All right. Okay, so let's get into it. How do we know each other? Well, my family moved back to Trinidad in the early 80s. And my sister Jillian and I were enrolled in St. Francois Girls College in Belmont, Port of Spain. Shout out to all the St. Francois girls. And you and Jill became thick as thieves as steel pan girls. So what were your best memories from those days?
Oh my God, so many. I think when the steel pans came back from England, I don't remember the exact year, but our St. Francois Steel Orchestra, we were really on top of the secondary schools groups of pan players, and so we were we were an excited group of girls, and we got an opportunity to go to England, and we did. And when we got back, of course, before the pans got back, and we were up on the top level. We would have been in Form 4, so we were up top, overlooking the driveway. And as 3 weeks later, as the truck comes up the hill, we were so excited. I went screaming, running down the hallway, so excited, and ran straight into Miss Blackman.
Oh no!
Listen to me, it was a hot mess. Memories like that, being free and not even thinking about confining or restricting yourself, and St. Francois being a place where somehow that was possible. Certainly for me. And I think most of the girls, there was a sense of freedom to express, freedom to explore. Women were being heard at that time. Denise Plummer was in the space. Calypso Rose was in the space. There was certain a vibe of about women in the space. And I think that the St. Francois student was able to sort of hone that and express it. So I didn't understand it as that way back then, but at the time, having the freedom to express myself was really, really, really a good memory of my time at St. Francois.
Yes. Nice. Mine was and believe it or not, it was grabbing 2 pies in the tuck shop, field hockey in the hollows, And the girls in my class always wanting to braid my hair at lunchtime. So shout out to Melanie C. Because that was so much fun. I used to love them combing my hair and braiding my hair. So every lunchtime it was somebody trying to do a style. So it was too much jokes. But yes, man, good times at St. Francois Girls, man.
Yes,
Good
indeed.
times. Nice, man.
Right.
So shout out to St. Francois. All right, so let's get into it. Now we both share a theater background. So I performed in musicals in high school when we were back in Canada. And then I eased into the music scene as a background vocalist for a bunch of bands in Toronto. Then in university, a shout out to Scarborough College, University of Toronto, I switched my major from like finance, French, and computer science. And then I headed into the arts, so music and theater. And it was such a great drama program. Shout out to Kathy Farrell, my professor, that made our classmates were so much fun, and we learned so much. But it was my mentor Judy. She was in the year ahead of us, or maybe 2 years ahead of us. She really showed me the ropes around sound and eventually stage management, which became my total passion. So that was my jam. So now, over the years, I ended up, kind of like when you go to university, you think you're going to go into that field. And then you realize, wait, I need to make money because not everybody gets a job as a stage manager, especially in Toronto or even in New York. So I just got to tap into that a little bit more in later years, working with a church and they're doing a big production. I did it just coming out of university as well. So just being able to leverage that stage management ends up being part of my life without, you're managing teams, you're managing work, and it ends up you're drawing from those same skills. So how did you get into the arts?
I stumbled into it, to be honest. I was approaching my young, I was approaching adulthood and I had no direction, to be honest. So I stumbled into the hotel school and I was there right out of secondary school. And while I was there, I recognized I didn't want to do that. So I opened the newspaper and I was looking for something. And I saw an ad by the Bagasse company. So by then I was already out of school. I had no point of reference of theater or drama at school, none. So when I got to the Bagasse company with Cecilia Salazar, Moving Good, Christine Johnson, wow, those, all the persons that laid the foundation for I would say, I don't know, modern theater, not so much traditional theater, but commercial theater. All those players had been home, had returned home, or had grown at home and developed a theater world. And I walked into it and fell in love with it. I didn't have an understanding of communication arts. I just knew that this resonated with me. And like you, I found my space in the backstage places. So I
Right.
too became a stage manager. I too have done a lot of that sort of backstage work, which led me into directing and whatnot. From that experience, I was sent out to New York. I got the opportunity to go to New York to study and
Nice.
ended up at the Actors Studio working there for many years. And so theater became my world out of not wanting something else.
Right. And did you is that where you started, like writing, and did you do any of that early, or this is just
I,
really acting?
this is act. I never did acting.
Oh,
Oh, I
okay.
I entered the space in an actor's workshop with Cecilia Salazar and Moving de Gouge, and quickly understood that I was not interested in being on the stage. So I got into
Yes.
set painting and background stuff. And when I got to university, I followed that pathway. And so I've never wanted to be on stage, but I'm a very good director, writer, producer. And so
Hmm.
I brought those skills into education, which is I was never heading into education. I've landed in education, but that's
Right.
not where I've been heading.
Right. Yeah, no, I think the same. It's like, yes, in university I got into theater, But yeah, we had to do specific pieces in class in order to
Yes.
pass, right? You had to do the acting. Yeah, at least you had to
I was pumped.
participate.
I was,
Yeah.
and I,
Really?
that is my biggest memory of stage work. Of course, I did minor roles in screen acting and different things,
Yes.
but I was Puck. That character stayed with me.
That's
Not
funny.
that I don't remember anything, but that work at that time stayed with me, and
Yeah.
I knew that I was not going to be an actor. I'm very good at it, but I don't want to do it. So
Yeah,
theater.
I was horrible at it. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. My classmates thought I was hilarious, but I every single time we got a role, like a Shakespearean role, the teacher that we had, she always wanted us to be theater, and
Doesn't
I
work.
just couldn't do that. So I always played Renee doing the role, and my classmates would be killing themselves laughing, and she would be furious with me because she thought I was making fun of it, but I wasn't. I was like, that's how I related to the character. So yeah, I quickly signed up for either stage managing or sound or lights every single time we did a show, so I could escape the acting.
Yeah, and I wonder now that I'm listening to what you're saying, I'm wondering if that's why I naturally gravitated. No, because I was in Trinidad when I walked into theater. I was gonna say that because my voice probably didn't lend itself to many of the roles that were being played in my experience in New York. Um, but no, that had nothing to do with it. I just don't
Yeah,
want to be.
yeah, that's great. So
Wow.
then, so then what was the next step in your career when you
Well,
were after that?
well, because because I understood theater from Trinidad, that was my introduction to it, and it was a very good introduction. Raymond Chukong, Lordy, when I was 18, working and being around people like Richard Raghubar Singh and Raymond Chukong, and that was when I was young, Randall Warren, and then going out to New York City and jumping into the active studio. That whole world, it became clear to me that I had to do something in that field. Out of necessity, I landed a teaching job as a theater assistant.
Hmm.
Out of necessity, being on a film crew, working with a film crew somewhere, I needed a job, a steady job, and somebody on the film crew knew somebody, and they put me in touch with Kathy Kennedy. Shout out to Kathy Kennedy, as you would say, and my career in education started with Kathy Kennedy, and my career in education as a communication arts specialist started with a
Hmm.
feature or focus in theater. That was my degree out of university. So
Hmm.
I started then to understand how to teach theater and how not to teach theater to create superstars, but to teach theater to create decent human beings
Hmm.
out
Nice,
of
nice.
children understanding how human beings engage and how to create um that 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 action would actually demonstrate intrinsically how to be a good human being.
Beautiful. And how old were the kids that you taught?
Always middle school to high school. I don't do the little ones.
Yeah.
I don't have pitch and pace for them. I barely have pitch and pace for most people, but the little ones definitely not. No, they go off running and crying. It doesn't work.
And what was your biggest takeaway from teaching those kids at that time?
At that time, my teaching career started in New York City, in Harlem, New York, in the 90s. So I'm teaching children who are dealing with stop and frisk um,
Mm.
laws, policies. And the children in front of me are children who are traumatized children. They don't know it. I don't know it. Nobody's really focusing on the trauma that a community is facing. So my education experience started with those children. And I am grateful, really forever grateful for that, because I learned right away how to truly educate each individual child in my space, not
Mm.
educate a group of people.
Right.
And so my experience as a young educator was very interesting, particularly because I was coming out of a very colonial mindset of education in Trinidad and Tobago. So you
Mm-hmm.
have to imagine me and the shock, the culture shock of the inner city child in a classroom, an
Mm.
inner city school, and the mindset of the children of those schools, which is, if I walk into the space and I'm taking the register, you're meeting me for the first time, I'm meeting you for the first time, I'm taking attendance, I'm calling your name, you're not answering. I get to the end of the list, I look up and I notice that this is the person who has not answered me. And I say, so can you tell me your name, please? And the seventh grade boy looks at me straight up and says, I ain't got to tell you a goddamn MF thing. I don't want to curse.
Wow.
Mother F thing. This is this
Mm-hmm.
seventh grade boy as tall as the desk looking up to me. I'm not that tall. I'm not much taller than him. But the truth is, I went into shock. Like I couldn't understand that dynamic. Being young, being aggressive, being on my own and feeling on my own in New York City and really dealing with the rough journey of that. My only response was to come back at him
Right.
very aggressively. He responded to that.
Mm.
He heard that
Mm-hmm.
and he was able to move forward with that.
Right.
And we became very close teacher student.
That's great.
It was great, and it embedded in me an importance in education, in understanding the role that I have as an educator.
Mm.
It is not for me to come in with all my understanding of life and put it on the people. That is not my role. My role is to really meet the person where they are with
Mm-hmm.
what they have and then show them their potential and how they can get there.
And when the near the well, is it like a semester or is it full-time school? How did you see the transition of the children from when you met them till when they either left or what have you?
Sometimes within a week, sometimes within a year, sometimes within 10 years.
Mm.
It really also depended on all the other aspects of their environment. Because
Right.
remember, the teachers only are only with them for 8 hours.
That's right. That's
And then
right.
they have a whole environment that they have to figure out how to navigate themselves through until they get back to a space that is relatively safe, I suppose. I don't want to be presumptuous, but I can say in my spaces, I mean, in schools, there's a measure of safety for a lot of children. And
Right.
those are the types of children that I engaged with from the onset of my experience as an educator of
Right.
theater. And Kathy Kennedy was no joke. She was like she is, and I remains one of the fiercest theater teachers that I've ever worked with. I went in as her assistant, and she was also an actress in New York City and elsewhere. But she um, really modeled for me what it meant to teach the student, not the group.
Right. That's fabulous. So how did that lead then into you doing the TEDx? How far was the span for that?
Well, I started teaching with Kathy Kennedy in 1991, no, October 1991. And I did the TEDx in Dubai in 2018 or
Oh
2017.
wow.
So the
Wow.
TEDx came 30 years later or 27 years later.
Oh
Um,
wow. So how did you tell us how you got to Dubai?
so that's the span that we're looking at in a nutshell. All right. So
Mm-hmm.
in a nutshell, I started in New York City and I started in New York City and moved cluelessly not with any specific goal to get to. I was moving as in my 20s. I was not at all clear about how to be and what I should be doing. Lynn Jackson in my university was my mentor, and she guided me as best as I think she could. But just being who I am and how I grew up, I didn't have the skills in place to take care of my life and understand for myself what I should be doing. So, in my 20s, I lived a very hard life,
Mm,
um, and got a lot of knocks, and that laid the foundation and the drive for that got me all the way to where I am now in Vietnam. And for me in New York City, when I write, I'm writing a memoir, and when I write about it and when I think and talk about New York City, I wouldn't want my life any other way. New
mm,
York City gave me what I needed. It gave me a measure of aggression also, and that aggression has worked against me. I have to learn to now control that aggression because I'm no longer in New York City. I'm no
mm.
longer in a space that needs that. So as I moved from New York City, I moved back home. I registered my nonprofit agency, and then I tried my best to work at the International School of Port of Spain in Trinidad and Tobago. I tried my best at the same time with that salary to put that toward my nonprofit, and that became my life.
Mm.
And with that being my life, it opened up my thinking to go out into the world. And so, with that thinking, I started talking to the director of the international school at the time, Mr. Barney Latham, big up to him. And I was there for 7 years in Trinidad. And in those 7 years, I taught at the international school and I ran my nonprofit. And when my mom passed, I came to understand that I could not sit down in Trinidad anymore and beg corporate and government to support the children of their nation. So I started to look outward, and that got me to Qatar as an international educator. So the International School of Port of Spain sponsored my master's degree as an international. So now I hold my master's as an international educator out of Massachusetts.
Ah,
Um,
nice.
And so that opened or created the possibility for me to now go and work in other international schools in the world. And so I have been in Qatar. I worked in Doha. I moved on to Thailand, to China, to the UAE, and now I'm in Vietnam. And the
So
TEDx
awesome.
happened when I was in Dubai, a university called BITS Pilani. They are actually a university based in India with a campus in Dubai. They were doing their TEDx, and they invited me as a guest to come in, um, to be the 10th speaker of the night and to present the topic of humanitarianism, through the
Fabulous.
NGO that I founded in Trinidad in 2002. So that's where the TEDx came from, and the theme of the TEDx had to do with the power of you. Um, which can lead me into the conversation of being a humanitarian. Um,
Yeah. Well, let's hold on to that because I want to get into that next. So
that's why I
let's
mentioned
now
it. So I
let's
could,
take a break, pause for
yes.
the cause, as I love to say, and then we will come back in a moment.
That's exactly.
All
All
right.
right, thank